What's up, you guys? When I first graduated college, my first goal was to get a high-paying job so I can ultimately buy cool stuff, right? Buy a dream car, dream truck, lake house, have all these things, and ultimately have a great career and make a lot of money over the long term. Now, the only bad thing with that mindset is I was thinking in the mindset of a consumer and not that of an investor. So today I'm going to talk about why I bought and ultimately sold my dream truck and kind of the reasons behind that decision to buy and also to sell. But first, please do subscribe below, you guys. I appreciate it. Hit the like button if you end up liking this video. All right, so let's talk about why I bought the truck. First and foremost, I drove a beat up 2002 Honda Accord Coupe for many years that was passed down through several people. I think I was the fourth owner of the car. Great car, worked well, low cost of ownership, pretty decent on gas mileage, so I didn't spend a ton at the pump. Insurance costs were pretty cheap. And overall, I was getting to the point where I was ready to graduate to a new car, and it was either put new tires, put some maintenance into the Honda, or look for a new car. So, of course, I think, what car have I always wanted? I wanted an awesome lifted, decked out truck. I was living in Texas at the time. You see them on the highway drive by you nonstop. So it's a constant reminder that I don't have one and I just had to have one. So at the time I was in kind of an entry-level sales job, starting to make some decent money. And I also side hustled on the weekend. I was working at a vineyard. I was kind of a sous chef, serving wine at the same time, showed people around, made decent money doing that, and I saved hardcore. So after about a year of saving, I had enough money to put a down payment on the truck, and I had a budget in place for over a year. So I knew I had the money to make the payments for a 3, 4, 5-year term. It didn't really matter, and I knew I had the ability to pay the truck off within 2 years. So let's back it up. I had a sales job that I didn't necessarily particularly enjoy at the time, and it paid decent, but not amazing. And then again, out of school, I wanted to make money so I can buy things that I've always wanted, right? I mean, that's what we're trained to do as consumers, to save up and to buy nice things for ourselves because we deserve it, right? Of course, I thought I deserved it. I was working hard in a new job and started to find some success and needed to validate that success by buying something new, moving into a nicer apartment, and so forth. We're all guilty of it at some point in our lives. I have always wanted a nice truck, and I always wanted a boat also. So I needed a truck or a larger SUV in order to pull such a boat. Now, the only issue of this that we'll get into is if I buy a nice truck, it's going to take me many years to save up to buy a boat in addition to the truck. So that's probably mistake number one. I also wanted to build some credit at the time because I only had one credit card that I had only had for about a year and a half. So my credit history wasn't all that strong. And if I wanted to buy a house ultimately or use debt to make an investment in real estate, I knew I was going to have to build some sort of credit. So I used that kind of as an excuse to buy a nicer truck, even though it wasn't necessary. You could still build credit in other ways. But ultimately, it did help build my credit a little bit over the following few years. Now, again, while I had the truck, I told myself I would pay it off in 2 years, which I ultimately did. And that was great because I took a new job around that year. I was working at Google down in Austin, Texas, saved up a ton of money and was just slamming my car payments, paying a ton over the principal amount each month. And I achieved my goal and I paid it off in 2 years instead of 5, which was great because I saved a ton of money on the interest that was going to be coming due in the following 3 years. Now, at the time, I was still investing some in the stock market. I hadn't yet gotten into real estate, but I knew I wanted to invest my money some way or another. So I was continuing to invest money into various stocks that I felt comfortable with, and I felt like I understood the company and the businesses. And so the only issue with that is if I didn't buy the truck, I could have used the money I was spending to pay off the truck sooner and invested more money at the time. And those investments at the time today would have been a significant amount of money. I could have bought the truck cash within 2 years if I just invested the money instead of buying the truck at that point in time. And before I get into the reasons why I sold the truck, I just want to say I really do miss driving that thing. It was great for the utility of it too. We had moved a few times. We had used the truck for camping and all sorts of other outdoor activities. So I really miss driving the truck, and I will eventually get another truck. But we're going to move on to why I ultimately sold the truck. So my wife and I moved to Nashville in 2018 and had interest in real estate. So this is when we've really started getting heavy interest into short-term rentals and long-term rentals, but ultimately decided our first investment was into a short-term rental to host on Airbnb. We had about the right amount of money for a down payment and to furnish the house, but while we were understanding how the loans worked for investment properties, we ultimately had to put a little bit more down, which left us with not a ton of wiggle room in immediate savings or emergency rainy day fund. So we need to figure out how we can collect money somewhere or another to furnish the house how we wanted to. Because if you guys have watched previous videos, it's important to furnish your house on Airbnb or apartment condo, whatever it is, to make it appealing for people to rent your place. And the more people that rent it, the more money you're going to make getting your investment. So it is important to have the extra effort and cost up front to reap the benefits longer term. So the fastest way to do that for me was to sell the dream truck that I owned. And that was a bit of a painful process, but I went to several dealerships. I tried selling it privately to folks. I ultimately traded it in and got a really cool Honda CR-V, super base model. Don't necessarily like driving it, but it saves me a ton of money every month on insurance, gas, and overall it's really not that bad of a car to drive and it gets the job done. And I took the difference in that money, which was a pretty good chunk of change, and we were able to furnish the house how we wanted. And ultimately that investment has already been paying off for us and will for years to come. So ultimately it was a good move, and something I really wish I would have done, kind of lesson learned, is to, if we had invested that money earlier on, we would have had even more money to invest today, or again, buy the truck cash today, whatever. The other thing that we've learned over the years, my wife and I have both come to the conclusion that while it's really nice to work hard and achieve your goals at a 9-to-5 job or whatever career that you're interested in pursuing, and save a bunch of money, it's really easy to save up and convince yourself to buy nicer things, right? Buy a nicer house, buy a nicer car, buy nicer clothes, and the list goes on. So ultimately we decided we needed to shift the way we think, right? So we need to think as an investor and not as a consumer. So once that mindset shifted, all of our actions on a weekly basis or monthly basis completely changed. We're no longer saving to buy things, and now we're saving to invest. And once we invest, our goal is to ultimately achieve financial freedom. And once we achieve financial freedom, we can start buying, the materialistic things that may or may not bring us happiness. But again, we're not going to be locked to a car payment or locked to a personal loan to buy something really nice for ourselves or a vacation that we always wanted to go on. Once you achieve financial freedom, all the materialistic things are just kind of icing on the cake, because once you have freedom of time, that will bring you true intrinsic satisfaction and happiness, right? Because you can do what you want, when you want, with whom you want, where you want, all that good stuff. And while the materialistic stuff is nice, it's really only temporary happiness, because if you're driving a nice truck like I was, but still at the time working a job that you didn't necessarily enjoy, then kind of what's the point of the truck if you're not really able to drive it to go enjoy things that you actually like doing, for me, which was the outdoors. So having nice things really means nothing and is not a symbolism of wealth just because you have expensive things at all. So I would encourage you guys to seek to achieve financial freedom first, and then treat yourselves later down the road. So again, you guys, if you don't buy, expensive vehicle or something that you're going to be really strapped for, and your ultimate goal is to achieve financial freedom and build significant wealth down the road to where you can really reap the benefits of the money that's working hard for you, we need to think like an investor and not like a consumer. Try and delay some of the materialistic things or satisfactions in your life in order to reap really great rewards down the road by delaying those satisfactions, instead investing your money. Again, we want to stop trading our time for money and have our money work hard for us. So a couple lessons learned. Number one is being in consumer debt sucks. Yes, it helps you build credit, of course. Again, that's what society tells us, right? But again, you guys need to think like an investor, because as we've talked about in a previous video, consumer debt is very different than investor debt. Because consumer debt, you're leveraging other people's money or the bank's money to buy things and then pay extra for it in interest. Investor debt is leveraging the bank's money or other people's money to buy assets that ultimately pay us monthly cash flow and help build wealth long term. So they're very, very two different things. Lesson number 2 is buying nice things, while nice at the time, is not going to bring you true happiness long term. Instead, I encourage you all to work on achieving financial freedom first, and then reaping the benefits of financial freedom or wealth building through real estate or investing in the stock market or other investments to achieve those materialistic things that you think you may need today, but you probably don't. Number 3, I definitely did love that truck. I will definitely have a truck again in the future. Not sure which one it will be. It'll be interesting to see some of the electric vehicles and electric trucks coming out with Rivian, Tesla, and others in the next several years. I probably won't buy a new truck for several years from now, but when I do, I'm really looking forward to seeing what new vehicles are on the market and what that landscape looks like. Lesson number 4, and I mentioned it before, I bought a nice truck, but I didn't have enough money for a boat. So looking back on it, maybe I could have bought a less expensive truck or SUV and kind of bit the bullet without having, as nice of a truck, and I could have gotten a boat at the same time. And again, I still probably would have spent the same amount of money either way, so I probably shouldn't have done either of those things, but at least if I went that route, I could have enjoyed the boat to go fishing and be on the water and things like that. So lastly, guys, a few recommendations for those watching. Do your best to resist spending or splurging on really nice things that ultimately you really can't afford. If you have the option to invest your money or spend the extra money on something twice as nice or the newest, iPhone, newest vehicle off the lot, whatever, try and delay that satisfaction and invest your money today. I guarantee you in the next several years, you could buy whatever item you have, twofold. You could buy a new car, maybe cash, from those investments. Although if you have grown your investments that much in the next several years, you're probably not going to want to, because you're going to realize the power of compound interest and you're going to ride that investing wave until you achieve financial freedom. Delay your satisfaction as long as possible. Sometimes the best things in life often come with time. So while you're working really hard today, try to change your goals from materialistic things to what's really going to bring you, again, true happiness down the road, and then let the materialistic stuff be icing on the cake. So lastly, guys, if you don't have a personal budget, I encourage you to create one today. I've done a video on a personal budget. I've provided templates to several people who have reached out to me. You're welcome to drop a comment or reach out to me in one way or another on social media. I'm happy to respond and send you the one I've used, but there's tons of different applications you can download on your phone to keep track of your budget, or you can just do one in Excel or Google Sheets. The reason I encourage you to create a budget is to figure out where you're spending money, where you could spend less money on unnecessary things, whether it's dining out, bars, alcohol at home, or clothing, shopping, whatever it is. Where can you start saving more money? And then where could you maybe side hustle on the weekends or during the evenings, during the weekdays, and make more money? And instead of spending and then figuring out how much you have left at the end of the month to save, why don't you start by saying, I'm going to save this much this month, and then I'm going to spend whatever's left over. So that way you can invest first and spend second versus spending first and investing what's left. Very, very important to adopt that mindset. And once you do, I promise you, you're going to hit a roll and you're going to be on your way to achieving financial freedom a lot sooner than you may have originally thought. Next time you're thinking about buying that brand new iPhone or Samsung or Google phone or whatever it is, why don't you just wait an extra year and instead invest the $1,200 you're going to spend on that new phone and buy a few shares of Apple, or buy a few shares of whatever the consumer brand that you are about to purchase the actual product from. Invest in the company. If you believe in it so much where you're ready to buy the next new thing every single year it comes out, skip a year or two and invest the money into the company and ride that wave. If you invested in Apple a few years ago and just bought one share, that would have doubled or tripled depending on what year you invested it in. And you could have bought a few new iPhones, right? So start thinking like an investor and less like a consumer, and you guys will reap the benefits, I promise.